Welcome everyone to Never Lose Sight of an Identity. Track every identity everywhere it goes in public, private, and beyond. I'm Courtney Octor. I am a business development manager here at IntiGrow, and I am joined by Bob Kalka from IBM and Jim Skidmore from IntiGrow, who will be walking us through such an important topic. As we all know, identity is like the foundation to a cybersecurity strategy. It is so important. So I'm going to now pass it over to Bob and Jim to lead this discussion.
Outstanding. So, hey, everybody. So, I am Bob Kalka. I am a global lead for security for IBM. I've been doing security now for 31 years at IBM. And I started on Kerberos in 1994. So I've been involved in identity management for that whole 31 years. And what Jim and I are going to walk you through is certainly an intriguing title, but I'm going to make it even more intriguing for you, because we're not only talking about never losing sight of an identity, but we're talking about, if you're into the Blues Brothers, both country and Western identities, said differently, machine and human identities. So often when we have these conversations, we're focused on one or the other. But this discussion around how to really do identity observability across both machine and human identities and how they're interacting intelligently or not so much intelligently is what we're going to talk about. So this really is emerging technology that has just come out in the last year or two that allows us to do things, big surprise, through AI that you just couldn't do before. So you want to make any opening comments, Jim?
No, I think we're good. This is, for many of our clients, for many folks, it's been a new frontier and an added layer of protection. So if you're looking at MITRE, if you're looking at NIST, obviously when phishing occurs or widespread jailbreaks occur, our goal is to prevent that even after an adversary will get past a firewall or, whatever their means of transport are. So yeah, that's we can talk more about it, Bob, and we'll wrap up with a few goodies that we have for everybody at the end.
Indeed. So, to state the obvious, it's well known that identity is the number one attack vector. There's a great saying that one of our partners has, which is hackers don't break in, they log in. And that's absolutely true. There's in the last year, there's been a 71% year-on-year increase in attacks that used compromised credentials. There are some studies that assert that 60% of all attacks are identity-based. I've seen other studies that claim it's 80%. And then if you look at all of this, 84% of organizations in the last year faced an identity-related breach. So what that screams out, and it can't be debated, is that whatever we are doing today, whatever the standard practices are to protect identities from attack and being used in attacks, are not working. And what that means, right, is that what most organizations do that are even paying any attention to this is using, right, a SIM tool in the SOC and turning on some kind of user behavior analytics capability to try to deduce from that massive glut of information coming into the SOC identity-related problems. Well, it's clearly not working. These stats all prove that. So what we're going to talk about is what has emerged as innovations in the industry that allow us to actually get a hold of this and to take identities and remove them from being at the top of the list here. So identity observability, what we've learned, is the big thing. Because anyone who's done cyber for any amount of time knows that sometimes there's things that we fear looking at because we know if we look at them, we've probably got responsibility to do something about them. And quite honestly, there hasn't been any capability that's really effective for doing both human and non-human or machine identity observability. And that's what's changed in the industry. And so we now have the ability to provide that observability, as I'm going to show you. And then frankly, we as an industry have to have the guts to actually be willing to look, right? So let me give you a picture of what we generally see, because I've literally spent 31 years flying around the globe, meeting with clients every day on identity management and related topics of data security. And It's really interesting because in most shops that we walk into, there's two different groups that own identities. There's the IT team that generally own the human identities, both the regular and the privileged users. And sometimes it reports to the CISO, sometimes it reports to IT operations. It used to be mostly to the CISO, but frankly, there's been a big shift moving back towards IT. And it's roughly half and half today. About half of the identity leaders report to CISOs or CSOs, and then the other half are reporting to IT. And then the machine identities are generally the purview of the cool kids in DevOps and the platform engineering teams. And in most, and so we know human identities are having a struggle today, and I'm going to show you exactly why in a moment. And if you work in DevOps, you know that machine identities are a big issue, right? Why are you hard coding secrets in apps? That's not very secure, right? But it's the standard of what everybody does. So both sides of it aren't doing well today. But then how do you actually bring them together? Because there's a natural organizational boundary issue here, right? That IT knows very little about what's going on with machine identities in most shops. And of course, DevOps and platform engineering have very little involvement in what's going on with the human identities on the other side. And you'd think we'd just sit down and collaborate, right? But anyone who knows anything about large organizations work is that that doesn't naturally occur. So we've got this problem that you have IT with human identities and you have DevOps with machine identities. Both groups are having issues, let alone have any chance of doing things at a macro level of how these things fit together. So let me show you what I mean. So generally, when we talk about human identities, we always talk about the two basic types, right? Workforce, consumers, citizens, if you're public sector, stuff like that. And I'm amazed at how many times I'll walk into a client and say, what is your human or right people identity or identity access management approach? And more often than not, and I mean like 90% of the time, I'll get the name of the tool. Oh, we've standardized on Octaping, SailPoint, Entra, ForgeRock, IBM Verify, whatever it is out there. And then I'll say, and we've also, standardized on a directory, typically Active Directory. To which I'll say, make the obvious comment, well, that's products, it's not a strategy. And the response is often, yeah, but we spent 9 months and this is our strategic platform. And the obvious question is, do you believe that everybody's going to use your strategic platform? And the answer is usually, well, we expect them to. But it ignores the fact that in most shops, you have at least one other IDP that's doing workforce. And if I'm being honest, in most shops, there's a homegrown identity system that was written 20 to 25 years ago that you've been trying to get rid of for the last 15 or 20 years, which is still hanging on. There's an on-prem thing you put in 10 to 12 years ago. Then you have the new cloud-based SaaS one. And you're going, yeah, we got to kind of rationalize that. And that ignores the fact that you also have a bunch of legacy apps that either use in a homegrown system or have side files still, right, with user IDs and passwords in them. And nobody wants to touch them because the people who wrote the apps aren't even around anymore and they're there. And that's before you get to hybrid multi-cloud where your managed identities are there too. So you see why human identity management is such a mess today is because we're managing in all these different places with different groups of people, and some of it we don't even feel like we can touch. But what's wild about this is that, once again, this is just the human side of it. What about the fact that the thing I hear everybody saying these days is that for every human identity, you have 60 on average, right? But you have 60 machine identities. These are your modernized apps and the services that are being deployed that need to connect with each other. And so you need an identity, right? So how do you do machine identity and secure API management and access and PKI, right? Certificate management, and then identity-based data protection. What we see most people do today is hard coding secrets in the apps so we can connect to each other, which of course is very, very easy to hack. And then is anyone actually hooking it into the larger human identity access management system? Most people aren't. So you see why we have a mess here, because these red dots represent all the different places we are taking our policy. Who should have access of what? What roles are there? What access rights? What are let's get brutal. How often do we want to recertify rights? How often do we want to rotate certificates? Stuff like that. Things we know we should be doing that a lot of people aren't even touching because they're going, can't really manage it today. So this is why not only human and machine identity management is a mess within their own purview, but together, how do you detect the human and machine identities are interacting in ways that they shouldn't be? Here's a very common one. All of a sudden, you have a shared non-human identity with a service account. And all of a sudden, do you notice that all of a sudden there's 20 human identities that all of a sudden are frequently using this non-human service account to get access to a bunch of stuff? And that 8 of those 20 identities hadn't been used in the last 18 months. See what I mean? The interaction between the human machine identities, not only struggling in the own silos, but also across the top, nobody's been able to view. So what this current state of things, you wonder why all the analysts are screaming about IT, wake up, you got to get a hold of this machine stuff too, is that there's a number of use cases that really make this just obvious why it has to be addressed. So with our friends at HashiCorp, which we just paid $6.3 billion, right, to acquire, and as you'll see, the obvious reasons why we did that in a moment, is that there's really 6 compelling use cases that we found that this mess is driving. The first is identity observability. And I just explained that one. Can you not only observe if you've got shadow identities and shadow directories and shadow assets and shadow application access out there, but do you have human and machine identities collaborating in ways that you go, that shouldn't be happening? Can you even detect that? Secondly is frictionless access from the end user's point of view. Can we somehow improve security while removing friction from the interaction? Third, can I go to centralized secrets? Instead of baking secrets into each application and service, can I instead go to an auditable system, central system of record, to get a secret that I use to connect to, some other services and applications? Now that is generally considered static secrets. So it's better than hard coding the secrets, right? Because you're getting it from an auditable tool, you can see what those are, but it's still generally a long-lived secret. So then what everybody wants to be able to get to, but what very few can today, is to dynamic secrets, where you do short-lived secrets that every time you connect to another service or app, you're actually getting a short-lived secret, and then next time you're going to go get a different one, right? PAM. Do I even need to say anything about this, right? PAM's been huge since 2003, when I remember Sarbanes-Oxley came out, and first thing they said is, thou shalt do PAM. Every shop we walk into still has PAM, but it's only deployed to a percentage, small percentage typically. Some have done it really well, but most have it to a small percentage of all the privileged users. And then finally, the kind of cool term that everybody's been using for a year and a half of ITDR, identity threat detection response. Can you tell when the identity system is under attack, both human and machine? And can you tell when you have policy bypasses, such as the most common one we're seeing is when you have an authenticated user going against an app that, according to the policy, requires MFA. And yet, if you look at the traffic, you see that the application is being exercised, but the MFA engine isn't, which indicates you somehow have a side door, backdoor, whatever to that application that's able to bypass the required thing. How do you tell that's happening? Right? MFA bypass, ZTNA bypass, VPN bypass, PAM bypass. Now, can you tell that there's a secrets management engine out there being used that you didn't even know you had? This is all part of identity threat management. So there's many more than these 6 cases, right? But these are the top shelf. We get into conversations every time we're working with clients on how do you actually get these things done. So between IBM, which once again, I've been here 31 years doing this, is we built our IBM Verify portfolio for identity and access management to be focused on providing a vendor neutral identity fabric, meaning if you have other people's tools like Octoping, SailPoint, etc., is that we can solve these problems for you. We have an engine that can do it. You may have an engine you already like that you can do it, but we can bring you this observability I've been talking about, regardless of what you're using under the covers. We do that in combination with our massive acquisition of HashiCorp, because in the DevOps world, HashiCorp Vault is the standard. It is the gorilla of the market for doing secrets management. So by pulling these solutions together, And now we have our Verify Identity and Access Management and the HashiCorp, Vault and Boundary and all that stuff as sister organizations together within IBM Automation. We now are doing things with integration that are very, very impressive. And the way to summarize it for you is first we give you the ability to inspect and find the problems. Some of you might call this ISPM today, Identity Security Posture Management. This is the ability to find not only all the shadow directories and assets I was talking about earlier, but also to find all of the secrets that are maybe being shared in GitHub or that are hard-coded in the apps. So that is a combination of IBM Verify, which we'll show you, and we're going to focus on it a lot here, our new asset called Verify Identity Protection, or VIP, and HashiCorp Vault Radar, which just came out 2 weeks ago, which gives you the ability to find all the secrets. And these things work together. Then we have the ability to protect. We've got the centralized secrets for both static and dynamic with HashiCorp Vault. We have PAM through our Verify Privilege tool. We have ITDR and behavioral analytics through VIP and Verify. And then we have the ability to govern both the human machine identities in a consistent way through joiner, mover, leaver, as well as applying MFA, frictionless FIDO2 passkeys, et cetera, across everything. So that's the big picture of what we're talking about. But let me tell you what the biggest magic is and what we're going to focus on for the rest of this call. Is that if you look at our use cases, I've talked about frictionless, I've talked about secure access, I've talked about governance, I've talked about PAM. And then I've talked about static and dynamic secrets with HashiCorp. What we're able to do that is truly unique in the industry today, and we now have it, and it's fully integrated with Vault and Verify, and it also works with Octoping, SailPoint, and the others, is the ability to give you an identity observability layer. This is an asset we have called Verify Identity Protection, or VIP. It is an AI engine, and as I'll show you in a minute what it collects, but it's now been trained for about 4.5 years. And what it gives you is the ability to detect shadow assets, directories, identities, etc. It gives you the ability to also detect where human and machine identities, how they're interacting, and where it doesn't make sense. Okay, very, very unique. Identity observability for both human and machine identities. So let's dive in. Once again, this is a company that IBM is invested in called Authmind that we call VIP once again. And they had this slogan, and we're seeing a lot of people pick this up because it's so true. Hackers don't break in, they log in. So the two cool kid terms are ISPM and ITDR. What an identity observability platform gives you is identity security posture management, which is where do I have sloppy implementation of identities that can be taken advantage of? And then do I have identity threat detection response, or ITDR, which is can I detect the real-time attacks and bypasses that are happening? One is more proactive, one is more reactive. It's really interesting because when I look at these two topics, if I'm talking to, say, the CISO office, they care a lot about ITDR, right? Because what do we do in the SOC? Threat detection response. That's essentially what a SIM and SOAR tools do. So what ITDR is apply that closer to the identity stack so we can actually find the stuff, not rely on a UBA tool to hopefully find some of it. And so the CISO offices really care about the ITDR side of it, the active threats, whereas IT operations is more interested in the security posture management side of where do I have problems that could lead to bigger problems down the road. So discovering the vulnerabilities and then detecting the real-time risky activities is what this is all about. So the way we do this, here's really where the magic comes from. So what VIP does is, based on this Authmind technology, is it collects 3 sources and folds them into this, now well-trained AI engine. All your network flows, all your cloud flows, and all your identity activity. That's all it's doing. And the reason that's so powerful is that it's not looking at what should be happening, what might be happening. It's looking at what's actually happening on the wire. So when you have a user who's authenticated against a shadow directory that some department set up 3 years ago and never got rid of, and everybody's using it for this part of the business, but Central IT had no idea it was there, had no idea if the policy's set, right? So you got a user who's authenticated against a shadow directory and accessing an MFA fronted app, but it's not exercising the MFA engine. It just shows it to you in real time. because it's just showing you what it's seeing happening around you. And the AI engine, of course, has been trained enough to have the intelligence to say, this is a problem. You probably want to look at this. And it puts it right in front of your face. You can't miss it. All right. So you see a screenshot of the console of it here. It's simple. It tells you what are the biggest problems that you have. Over 70 detection logics built into it. And we've got out-of-the-box connectors, not only for the IBM portfolios, but as I said, it works with, if you're using Octoping, et cetera, works with them too. And it works with HashiCorp, Vault, and Boundary today. So it gives you both the machine as well as the human identity observability. Of all the things that it can do, because there's actually roughly 150 to 200 use cases in their documentation, is that these are the ones that are most popular, the things that clients are using it for because they find it very quickly. And the IntiGrow folks can help you find this stuff very quickly, as Jim will show you at the end. But once again, the whole idea of shadow assets, shadow access, shadow directories, shadow secrets management engines. We've had cases where we bring this in and the DevOps team says, well, we're manually managing the secrets management. And then you find out that you've got 3 different groups that downloaded the free version of HashiCorp Vault and are all using it in different ways, right? So it finds all this stuff. It finds all the blind spots of what's being used and what's missing. Secondly is infrastructure issues. Credential hygiene, service account security. And then finally is a risky activity, and that's the bypass, which I've already talked about. It finds all of these things and puts it on the screen right in front of you and allows you to drill down and even come up with histograms showing when did the problem start, how active is it being leveraged, and things like that. True identity observability for human and machine identities. The way it works is that we hook into the network. You hook into your SIM tool if you're collecting lots of stuff there, and you hook into your identity engines, and it just pulls them and it sends it through the deep learning, through the AI engine. And then not only does it give you the visibility, but it also gives you the R part of ITDR. Most vendors doing ITDR are doing ITD, which is identity threat detection. This also gives you the response capability because it allows you to integrate with several of the SOAR engines that are out there. So when you find a specific problem, you can go kick off a runbook in your SOAR. It also gives you the capability to execute activities from within the tool itself. So it's actually ITDR, not just ITD. All right. And so once again, the way that you hook it up is that if you, for example, are pulling everything into a SIM, you can just pull it all from your SIM. If you want to just put it on your flow sensors on your network, you can do it that way. And then, of course, you're hooking into the IDP. So there's lots of flexibility in how you get it. It is dependent on how you've actually architected your environment for how it actually takes place. So a good example of how this technology, right, could have helped dramatically, and we talked to the Change Healthcare folks, is that if you look at the sort of how the Change Healthcare breach took place, where as always, initial access, in this case through a 0-day, and then it expands as a new account is created that's then leveraged to download ransomware and then establish C2C communications, is that this technology in VIP could have detected all 4 of those touch points as it expanded. First of all, on the 0-day, it could have detected the unexpected access to an asset. You say, wait a minute, that shouldn't be accessing that. And why is there all of a sudden a new remote access solution that's not on our approved list and we've never seen it before? Then, as the access was expanded, all of a sudden you detect user access with super weak credentials. So a new admin account was created and it had very weak credentials. So how did that happen? It would notice that immediately. Then, as you got your lateral move through the network, because remember, we're looking at all the net flows and cloud flows, you would have seen that expansion. And then finally, you can detect access to the known C2C hosts. All 4 of those points as it expanded, we could have detected that. So that's what this thing is all about. It's essentially, from a philosophical model, it's ISPM and ITDR. From a reality point of view, it gives you full identity observability over both machine and human identities. So it allows you to figure out where are my problems. You can attack the problems, not try to go bottom up and fix everything philosophically and hope everything works well. So one of the things that IntiGrow does with us, and I'm going to turn it over to Jim here in a minute, but we have the ability to come in at no cost and spend a couple of hours with you and show you your reality. So we would love to do that with you here. So Jim, I am going to turn it over to you in a sec. I just want to close with some comments that, IBM has majored for 6 to 8 years now on hybrid cloud and AI. And that's how we've expanded our identity approach. We didn't expand it by saying, oh, we want to build a better mousetrap than the IDPs that are out there. Our IDP is great, right? We have the largest identity management deployment in the world right now. We've got a telco, I can't say who, but guess. We've got a telco with 500 million users in production on IBM Verify today. So we know we can scale to the heavens. So we've got great engines, but what we're focused on is how do you leverage AI and hybrid to actually differentiate what we're doing in the market? And this is a perfect example of this. Because if you're worried about human and machine identities, you need to improve how you're doing human IAM. You need to get a hold of how machine IAM is going. The best place to start is observability of what's actually happening so I can fix the problems I know I have and then radically improve it going forward. And that's what we've done here. And that's why we can do this for you, even if you don't have the IBM Verify engine. If you have Octoping, SailPoint, Microsoft, whatever, we can do everything I've talked to you about here through VIP as well as with a HashiCorp Vault. So that's what we do. So now let's turn it over to the folks that we know can make this thing sing for you. Jim?
Thanks, Bob. So for those of us that aren't familiar with IntiGrow, maybe as much as IBM, we are a global systems integrator, planner. I think I'm a little short of Bob. I've been working with the channel, building these for probably 25 years in the channel, but we do work seamlessly together to help solve these issues, and are available as a resource to folks, as at their beck and call. We are award-winning. We've won a number of awards, but I'm not going to go into all that chicanery here. So we are also a minority-owned business enterprise, just in case anybody has questions along those lines. So we could probably go on to the next one. I think you might have the wheel. Thanks. As Bob mentioned, there are a number of complementary maturity assessments that we do for people. And oftentimes this is what helps us to develop the relationships that we have with many, and it is with many, many Fortune 1000 organizations. We also do work in the public sector a bit on this very technology. But we do things like when people are, Bob was talking about SOAR integration, for example, when people are planning that, when they're trying to figure out how they're going to get their EDR or XDR information to be manageable back in orchestration and response, as Bob mentioned, for change management to create runbooks and automate their whole process. We help people to understand how that should look and how it can look. Obviously, we were just talking about identity security posture assessment. These are events that we come in basically on a gratis basis and literally plug in and show you your identity activity, in kind of near real time, so you can get a feel for kind of what this all looks like. As one person said to me, this is the best TV show I ever watched, because they understood at a different level now and could think more about proactive policy enforcement than just taking standard identity steps to kind of manage and govern policy. So this is eye-opening. I'm surprised, probably I won't be surprised if a lot of people do this now that we're doing this, just to have a look-see, to kind of understand what their users are doing and kind of what's going on. This also dovetails into other areas. So for data resiliency, but also identity compliance, as we talked a little about earlier, we have to do things like periodic automated attestation, or what we call access recertification. There are different areas where we can literally help anybody to automate these processes without having to collect log events. And I'm sure Bob sees some of these, I know I do, even in fairly large companies where we have groups of 10 or 20 people still collecting log events in Excel spreadsheets so they can give them to auditors. That is a waste of hundreds of thousands of dollars and is also a very burdensome thing on a team. And some might argue tedious. So if you have not automated that process, it's something we can do very easily. That is a requirement for FERC. That is a requirement for GDPR now. If you're familiar with Gramm-Leach-Bliley, if you're familiar with HIPAA, they're kind of all ways of saying the same thing. As Bob mentioned, we need identity level traceability and proof that an entity is who it says it is. So these are areas that we can help you kind of automate that process and look. Zero trust maturity is kind of another area that we're very involved. Everybody's heard the word zero trust till they're blue in the face, probably at this point in time. But really, our goal is to help you get to least privilege. And it's not just by feeding some of your log events from somewhere into a SIM or other ways that you may have experienced that. We literally will help you go through your topology, look at your attributes, look at the roles and what we call the authoritative source directories that you have that are the roles driving what everyone in the organization has access to, and we'll help you sort of unmutate that. What that does is establishes, I think as we all know, by reducing that complexity and by getting to least privilege, the statistics are overwhelming in terms of the amount of breach reduction capability that's out there by, I think, a tune of about 85%. So if you haven't looked into this, if you're running a mainframe, if you're running Linux assets, Unix assets, Windows assets, and obviously all kinds of cloud assets, or just as a service applications, you probably have 20 different sets of roles. And you cannot effectively govern your enterprise, and you're therefore 500% more, really exposed. So that's another thing that we help folks do. Obviously, security posture and policy are critical. People don't always understand what controls they should put that are standards around their standard lifeblood applications like SAP, like email and others. We help people establish standards there. We do have pen testing capabilities that are advanced. So that's kind of another area. AI corporate policy developments become very important for us today. As Bob was talking about machine accounts earlier, I think a lot of people start to think now about, I have people out there doing all kinds of ungoverned AI things. And pretty much every organization we walk into says, well, we're only using it for R&D over here, and Kathy and Bob make the decision about who gets to use it. Hogwash, right? A lot of people are, we have developers logging in with AI assistants. We have all kinds of activity there that are going on that are gaining access to data that from a compliance perspective and a legal perspective, they often shouldn't have access to. So we look at it now as the seventh identity type from our perspective. It's IntiGrow's perspective. And we help you to understand how to join that with an admin account or to create human level interaction with that AI component to ensure that it is compliant. Because don't forget, when AI acts on someone's behalf, it's in the LDAP. It could be an orphaned account. It could be looked at from a compliance perspective a lot of different ways. So we help people to really understand how to govern their, identity govern really their AI kind of posture and all their assets. The other thing that we do is called a business value assessment. If you've been in this ecosystem for a long time, a lot of people are using 10 tools to do the work of 3 because we've mutated over the course of time. We help people to understand what capabilities are available in current things that they might have under maintenance or that they might own One great example of this, when I talked about SIM and SOAR, there are a lot of crossover capabilities between the two. People may have two different tools to do that, which they probably don't need. So, we identify where there are opportunities for spending savings and opportunities to help to grow their infrastructure intelligently or utilize better kind of the tools that they have. So again, as a result of this discussion, it's likely we normally get folks kind of getting back to us on the security posture assessment. Really, if you would like to have an in-depth look, and I mean an in-depth look, and I'm going to be really honest with everybody here, the only level of visibility I've seen, and I've been working in this industry with multiple partners for a very long time. Microsoft has some visibility between Azure and on-prem AD and auto synchronization of accounts, and they can sort of see kind of that user level activity through monitoring. You have never seen anything like IBM Security Posture Assessment. So that's a piece of innovation like we've never seen before. The other thing I would mention is the TDR part of this is often really important for a lot of people, where detect and respond can be mission critical, so that as we identify an anomaly in user behavior or a failed login attempt or any other issue, we can intervene prior to anything ever happening or anybody accessing your central domain structure or identity stores. So that's part of the gift to you today. We're grateful for everybody coming today. Very grateful for Bob on the road jumping aboard today. And at this point, I think we would be happy to answer any questions that the gang has with regard to a lot of the Bob overview or any of these assessment opportunities.
I guess one question that I've been, hearing, especially in the industry, is what's the most, emerging research showing in the identity space? And I don't know, Bob or Jim, if you want to expand a little further on that.
What's kind of funny about that is that for a while there wasn't much research going on the identity space, because identity is fascinating. Because in our industry, all of us here have a couple of decades doing this, is that identity management is like this in attention. As people will convince themselves we're doing well enough, so now we got lots of other problems to worry about, and it kind of goes down, and you don't see a lot of activity. And then we go, well, wait a minute. Oh, we never really fixed the PAM problem 20 years ago, but now we got these machine identities, and we're not even sure what's going on. So we're in one of those kind of heading towards a peak times in the world of identity and access management. So now there's a lot of studies coming out that are focused on it. And for example, IBM 3 weeks ago at the RSA conference came out with our new IBM X-Force Threat Intelligence Index from our X-Force research labs. And what the conclusions, what the headlines out of this year's, the 2025 study were, is there's two big conclusions. Number one, ransomware is dropping radically, which is very interesting, and lots of reasons. You can download the report. It's no charge, and read all about that. But it's the fact that identities continue to be the number one attack vector. In particular, the X-Force team said 30% of all of the attacks that they were called in to analyze this year came from 30% of everything they looked at was based on leveraging a compromised valid credential. So that is like the ultimate kind of example for you of hackers don't break in, they log in, right? So someone, and by the way, the main way that they're getting the credentials to be able to compromise them is through phishing. So the percentage of phishing attacks that went up with a goal of basically getting credentials skyrocketed over the last year for the X-Force team. So there you go, right? I mean, the hackers are going to go, black hats are going to go to where the lowest hanging fruit is. And the lowest hanging fruit is the sloppy identity posture and lack of threat analysis focused on those identities. So, for example, in this case of leveraging a compromised valid credential, inside of IBM Verify today, we've baked in the same AI technology that banks around the world use to detect online transactional fraud in real time. We've baked that same exact AI engine into IBM Verify. So if you have a credential that someone's compromised, and you can tell that the first 274 times they authenticated, they had a certain typing rate and error rate in their typing. And then when the hacker comes in with the compromised credential, as soon as they authenticate, you're going to see it doesn't match. Our cost of data breach study from last year, another good one, it's no charge. You can go to IBM Ponemon Institute cost of data breach study that came out late last year, says that once again, the longest time to identify and contain an attack today is when someone is leveraging a compromised valid credential. Same exact thing we're talking about, that 30% of everything X4 saw last year was leveraging compromised credentials. The cost of data breach study shows that the average time to identify and contain an attack based on leveraging a compromised valid credential is 292 days. 2/3 of a year to identify and contain the attack. That's insane. So you see that there's a kind of a glut of research now coming out that's focused on identity, since that is the number one attack vector, and it points out the need for this observability, right? Which us and IntiGrow can help you guys with, because we can, within a few hours, give you observability into things on both the human and machine side that you didn't even know what was going on. And then you can solve them before they actually take an advantage, right? So any other thoughts, Jim?
No, I think that's a great answer. I think that the intervention on behalf of policy and stepping up authentication and doing anything based on the entity behavior analytics capability is, I think, something people don't take advantage of enough today. But yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with the Ponemon data. It never ceases to amaze me, and it never ceases post-breach to amaze me in terms of how long it takes to come out that somebody actually discerns what actually happened.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, cool.
Yeah. So were there other questions, Court, along the way?
No other questions. Thank you so much, Bob, Jim, for leading this discussion. And thank you to all of you for attending. If you have further questions, please reach out to Bob, Jim, or myself. We're happy to get you started on some of our complementary maturity assessments and help you create that roadmap for your identity strategy. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.